Yeah, thanks Cynthia for inviting me down. Always happy to discuss some GIS related things. My name's Andrew Morden. I've worked for quite a few years now for the City of Winnipeg's Water and Waste Department in a GIS capacity. We have what I would consider, in my opinion, a fairly complex GIS. We have 150 different feature classes in our GIS. There's two disparate networks. We have sewer and water. They're all connected with different business rules and topology. It's really something. It's a beast, and it can be very difficult for new people coming in to get a handle on all the just the magnitude of the data and the idiosyncrasies around it and all that sort of thing. And so I developed an educational program to help people that are new to the GIS, and especially for people that are new to GIS in general, trying to use our GIS. And what you're going to see today is a little snippet of one of the introductory pieces that I did. Now, I'm not going to focus in on successes and challenges of our GIS, which I've seen a lot of. This is just going to be the system itself and the data, how it came to be. And hopefully it gives you guys an insight into how municipal government or utility GIS comes to be or may develop. So I think we all know what a GIS is. We at Water and Waste have this sort of system, but it was a long time in development, actually 30 years to get to the point where you are today. There's just a snapshot of some statistics for you. 2.5 million entities in there, 1,800 different attributes. The figure that's significant for me is the 29 custom applications that are running off of the GIS, some of those live. And IST knows this as much as I do, that if you try and make a change, you better make sure that you're prudent in checking what that change is going to affect. And also, if you're editing that data, and that's my responsibility, is the editing of all this data, you better make sure you know what you're doing, because you could break something. Now, 6 of those 29 applications are web-based, and they're very important for the city at large. iView is a corporate application, meaning corporate, the entire city. They take the data from every department, they put it into a web base, and it basically makes GIS ubiquitous for the entire city. The flood manual, that's another important one for those that don't know. It's an application that Water and Waste runs that it takes a river profile that you put into it, and it spits out a list of tasks that have to be completed as the water rises. And tasks like that would be sealing manholes as the water gets higher, or raising the dike itself. It's a very important application since 1997. There's a look at our workspace we use for editing data. It's pretty overwhelming. There's about 170 items in there. But anyways, let's start at the beginning. Our GIS started in an era when people were wearing leg warmers when it wasn't cold, 1987. The city itself had an initiative, and this was not Water and Waste. This was a corporate initiative, the entire city. They wanted to better manage their land-based data, and they estimated at the time it was 70% of what they owned. Now, at that time, the department where I worked didn't exist. There was 2 departments that had responsibility for all the water and sewer in the city. There was the Waterworks Waste and Disposal Department and the Operations Department. Now, both of those are not around today. But the Waterworks Waste and Disposal Department, they looked after what we called or still call the regional plant. That's all the major infrastructure for the city of Winnipeg. You see the aqueduct coming in from the east, and all the sanitary sewers, the interceptors that go between they go to the treatment plants, and the LDS trunk sewers, which are the really big LDS sewers. That was their responsibility, citywide. However, the operations department, they were also part of this, and they were split into 6 geographic areas. And at the time of this initiative, there were 6, but it was later down to 5, and that's why I have number 1 in dotted lines there, because it was at some point in the early 90s, it was annexed to District 2 and District 6 there, so there was only 5. But these geographic districts, there's what their responsibility was, and that's all the what's called the distribution water mains and just the regular water mains that basically the ones that are under your street in front of your house. And you can see by the sheer just the sheer length of piping they had to maintain that this these departments became the focus for this LBIS initiative with these 6 or 5 districts. So a company called Linet Graphics was contracted, and they were contracted to build 5 separate LBIS systems for these districts. Now the base map, I'm not sure where it came from, and I'm hoping maybe somebody here from the province perhaps knows. I was told that the base map for the city's GIS came from the province, and it was massaged somehow by what was Land Surveys and Real Estate at the time, became PP&D. I'm not really sure, but the base map they used, it was produced by a combination of those 2 institutions, and it was the most up-to-date at the time, as far as I know, NAT 83, 1990. So it took them 4 years to build these systems. They weren't GISs. They were more what people call AM/FM systems, Automated Mapping Facilities Management. A lot of people have probably heard that term before. These 5 systems, like I said, they weren't GISs, but they became the precursor to what we now consider our GIS in 2017. And a lot happened in between that point and now, which I'm going to show you some of it. So the information for these systems came from record drawings, a lot of it. The same as it does today. We estimate about 70% of the information going into the GIS comes from record drawings. There was also systems, paper systems specific to the districts, those 3 that you see there. I'll just make mention of the water and sewer record books, because these were really something to see, and I was reminded of them when I looked at this papyrus display here, just from the age. These books were about yay high, this wide, and they had some sort of unknown cover on them, and they definitely looked like something that a very old gentleman with a long beard would carry down from a mountain. Like, they're really something to see. And they've been around probably before the district days. This was when, you know, the RM of Fort Garry, or, you know, the city of Transcona, those days, before there was like this, the Unicity or whatever it was called. So there's something, and they're still around, because we still find things in there that have been missed once in a while. Other traditional data went in. Anecdotal information, that's something that is worth mentioning, because these operational districts, if you consider the time, there were people that grew up in those district areas, and they you know, went to work for the operations department, and they knew every nook and cranny of that district. You know, whatever district they were in, they knew it very well, and they had an incredible amount of institutional knowledge in their head. And you know, we know today that you have to capture that information, otherwise it gets lost. Back in that day, we didn't know that as much as we know now, So I'm sure some of that information got put into the system, but unfortunately, probably a lot of it got lost too. Also worthwhile mentioning is the data varied from province or from district to district, because these were like separate towns all over the city, run by different people, different philosophies on record keeping, and yeah, just the quality, everything just varied. I'm sure that had an effect on what data went into these systems, and as well. At this point in time, this was a huge step forward for computers and GIS. This was a computer system coming in when there was nothing but paper systems anywhere in the city, and some people were very embracing of the new technology, and other people we know don't embrace new technology. And with this such a big step, I think that it probably polarized people as to that new system. I don't want nothing to do with it, that sort of thing. We're not saturated. They weren't saturated with technology like we are today. I'm sure that polarizing effect had an effect on, in turn, how those systems were built. To get the information into the system, they did what was called scrubbing. They put everything on a huge atlas sheet, which was just a geographic block of area, and they handed it to somebody else who was a CAD person, really good with graphics. They used their CAD skills, put it into the database, and then somebody that was good with data processing and typing, they typed in the attributes at a later date. Not necessarily the way we edit things in a GIS today, but for a major project, I guess that was the most efficient way to do it, because you used most of what people's skills were. Some field checking done, quality checking for these systems as well. Everything was above board as far as I know. And actually for 1 year, each respective district maintain these separate LBIS systems. And that's what they maintained them on, these VAX workstations they were called. They were very successful microcomputers for the time, according to Wikipedia anyways. Yeah, they had a database that just sat beside the box. It was called RDB. That database format got bought up by Oracle actually, and is still buried in their name somewhere. I saw that somewhere in Wikipedia too. But these machines were very expensive for the time. There wasn't too many of them around, and they ran two different softwares to edit the data. There was a sewer network facilities management and a water network facilities management. So it's not like today you get rights, you go in and you edit stuff. This was, you want to edit sewer, you had to go into a separate application. It was quite different than things are now. Collectively, those two softwares just became known as OPFM, Operations Facilities Management. And I'm going to show you the splash screen for it there. Unfortunately, it has no color. There was a bluish tinge to it, I think. But yeah, your basic vintage computer screen. There's a look at a couple of the menus. There wasn't much to it. To edit, you went into facilities management and then water or sewer. And you'll see there's quite a few other things on those menus, and none of them were really ever implemented. They had ideas to do all sorts of things, but the interface and what you could do remained pretty sparse over the course of the life of these machines. Now they had some limitations, and I regret to use the word limitations because in my opinion, these were very good systems for the day and for what they were built for. But when I say limitations, I'm talking about compared to what we can do with the GIS today. So all the topology and rules, that was all defined through custom coding. It was not something like setting up a schema with rules like we do now. It was very intense, a lot of coding. You couldn't do any spatial querying in these systems. In fact, querying itself was limited. There was, most of the querying was actually done by IT. They ran a script behind the scenes, and they actually queried one field, I think, to get some sort of inventory information. It wasn't designed for that. It was designed for automated mapping though, and it did that very well. They used these systems to print out atlas sheets for all the emergency services people, those people that are on the street at 2 in the morning. You know, there's a geyser of water coming up and it's 40 below, they're trying to shut the water off. Those people started using atlas sheets printed from these systems, and various other people that were frontline staff. Some inventory, like I was saying, and basically just not open. They were more for day-to-day decisions rather than sort of long-term analysis that you're going to get out of a GIS. How are we doing for time?
Yeah, like 9 minutes.
9 minutes? Okay, got to go here. In 1995, as often happens in the city, political climate changes, and they dissolved the operations department. And they created this new entity, the Water and Waste Department, where I now work. And WWD was to inherit these new, these 10 databases from from the old districts. And sort of accounts of what happened at that time. Like, this was a huge time of upheaval, right? Staff were dispersing everywhere. You know, a lot of, you know, just a lot of bad feelings. You know, people, you know, their department was, you know, basically canceled. So, you know, these databases were just brought over to Water and Waste, and anecdotal accounts said that, you know what, there was just 10 boxes piled up in the corner of IST, and they had to reconcile everything. And it took them about an hour, actually, or sorry, a year to do that, actually. It took them an hour to gasp and figure out what they were going to do. Stewardship of this data was given to the engineering division of the Water and Waste Department, where it resides today. At this point, the regional plant was added, and that's all the aqueduct, the feeder mains, and the main sewers. That was all added to the LBIS at that time. PCs, the microcomputers we started calling PCs at this point in time, they were more prominent now in business and in government. So people were using PCs, and they figured out a way to join to this OPFM application so they could edit this data by PC. It was probably pretty clunky, but Water and Waste edited the data like that for a couple of years. So. MapInfo started actually becoming widely used in the city at this point in time. I know for Water and Waste, we couldn't do any analysis on that data in that system. So what they did was once a year they ported it out of the server, and they got it into a format that MapInfo could read, and then you would do your analysis from there. So it was analysis on a static copy of the data. It wasn't dynamic like usually we have with the GIS today. Bad news happened in '97. The software company decided they were discontinuing its product. Water and Waste had about 3 years to figure out how they were going to edit this data. They got together with corporate, which is all the city basically downtown, and they put together a business plan in 1999, and part of that business plan was to select a bona fide GIS platform. The word GIS was now becoming part of this. It was kind of more the buzzword now in the public lexicon, this word GIS, so everybody wanted to get a GIS. A lot of staff from Water and Waste were on the selection committee. I'm not going to say too much about this. Intergraph's product, GeoMedia, was selected around 2000, and it was interesting because they were developing a product called GPW at that time, and Water and Waste had this huge, very particular spec that they wanted to reproduce all the editing they were doing in this old system in a new GIS. And so they gave the spec to Intergraph, and they basically fashioned this GPW product after the spec. So I guess basically it ticked all the boxes for water and waste to, you know, have this thing custom built basically. I don't know much else other than that. We're using GPW today. Excuse me. Yeah, it took a year's time. How are we doing for time there?
3 minutes.
3? Okay. It took a year's time to migrate all the old system into the new system. They flipped the switch in 2002, and I remember it very well because that's when I got this job and basically all hell broke loose. No, it wasn't that bad actually. There were some growing pains. The GPW product was in beta mode. We had a lot of conversations with developers down south. There was network related challenges because back in that day the networks weren't as large, but they were not as, the infrastructure wasn't as good as well. So you know, the old analogy of trying to get a golf ball through a garden hose, that was used quite a bit by people that weren't in the same building as the server. It was slow if you were, you know, a virtual or physical distance away from the server. Not like it is now. Over the years, it evolved to be a very stable platform. We've never had any real outages, or we've been taken care of pretty good by the corporate people too that look after the back end of things. So I do have some milestones to go through, but I'm probably out of time here, so I'll maybe leave it at that. And hopefully I've given you guys kind of a window into how you know, a utility GIS develops or could develop.